I counted 6 love scenes. 6. Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort, stars Anthony Elot, Aquila Zoll, Sadie Katz, and is directed by Valerie Milev. What's up, guys? Let me tell you why we are here. Why am I reviewing Wrong Turn 6? If you remember, I just did my top 50 best or greatest horror sequels. And of course, you want to do the worst when you do the best. So I was going to do the top 50 worst horror sequels. I think I got about almost 40. And I'm running out of steam. And I'm like, damn, I want to give my audience 50, but there's so many bad horror movies that I've never seen. And I know that these franchises like Wrong Turn have a lot of really bad movies, but I just avoid bad movies like the plague. And then I remember, because people in Killer Flicks always talk about, you know, Wrong Turn, that franchise pops up, especially when the last movie came out. And I heard tell of one of the movies pretty much being, and I think the quote was, softcore porn. And that's pretty much what it is. It's like, wait, this is like about mountain men, cannibal, inbreds in the woods, and how could this be like softcore porn? Let me check it out for myself. And I did, and I watched Wrong Turn 6, which just kind of works out because sometimes I go in reverse order with franchises, and I guess that's what I will do with Wrong Turn. I'll do 6, I'll work my way back, right? I did that with the first time I reviewed Halloween. I actually worked my way back. This was before the David Gordon Green trilogy, so I started with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Yeah, so here we are, Wrong Turn 6. Went into this movie expecting complete and utter shit. And what I got was almost complete and utter shit. But somehow, I kind of enjoyed it. I don't know. And I was scared to tell you guys that. Like, I enjoy, you know, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, I kind of enjoyed that. Now I have to go upstairs and tell them that I kind of enjoyed that. Oh my God. You know what though? Let me tell you why I enjoyed it, okay? Because you could file it under so bad it's good. But you remember like back in the like the 80s and 90s. A lot of you guys don't remember because you're not that age, okay? But I was a teenager in the 80s and there was a thing called Cinemax. Which Cinemax is still around, but we called it Skinemax. On like late nights around like, you know, 2 in the morning, they would always be playing these like adult softcore porn movies pretty much. Softcore porn is where they can't like show you, they can't show you the act because the act isn't actually happening. It's just 2 naked people looking like they're getting it on. That's pretty much what it is. And usually in these types of movies, you would see quite a few of these scenes spaced throughout the movie. Shannon Tweed, Gene Simmons, I think ex-wife now? Are they still together? She had a, you know, that was her living back in the 80s and 90s. She did these Skinemax type movies. And really the timing couldn't have been more perfect because you had like Basic Instinct coming out in 92. You had Fatal Attraction a few years before. So there was kind of this movement of these types of films, and, you know, with A-level type stuff, with those 2 movies I just mentioned. And of course they were going to capitalize on it. So especially after Basic Instinct, they started making all these erotic thrillers is what they called them, but they were pretty much Skinemax type movies. You don't really see them that much anymore, except Wrong Turn 6. You see how I brought it back around? But anyway, I've gotten way ahead of myself. Let me give you a plot synopsis, a quick plot synopsis. Does it really even matter at this point? By the way, I've never seen any of the Wrong Turn sequels since the first one. I did see the new one, which I did review, but I've never seen, I guess, anything between the bookends, okay? So I'm working my way back, and this is the first time I've seen any of these movies. And after watching this, I realized I didn't need to watch anything before this. I didn't ask myself, wait, what is that about? You know, knowing that it probably linked to previous movies. No, none of that is in here, and I would imagine that's the way it is for pretty much all the movies. But you got this character by the name of Danny. Him and his girlfriend and friends, they go because he is inheriting this hotel. A lot of money, you know, but he doesn't know what it's going to be until he gets there. And when he gets there, there are these people occupying the hotel who turn out to be his family, I guess distant family or whatever. And right away you can tell that this is like Beverly Hillbillies type stuff. Like there's inbreeding going on. Did they? I don't think they did that in Beverly Hillbillies, but it definitely feels like a Southern thing. Getting myself in trouble. I can say that though, because I was raised in Mississippi. But you got this character who is easily the most memorable character out of this entire movie, since I can start with the pros. This character, Sally, whoa, she really goes for it, and she's horny as hell throughout the whole movie. She wants to get some of that family loving, and she'll stop at nothing to get it. And it just so happens Danny is a true blood, I guess, and so she wants his loving the most. These movies are so stupid because what is the sole purpose of doing, like, it never really tells you like what their ultimate goal is. To have children that are, let's face it, mentally challenged? I don't know. And so early on in the movie, they take hold of Danny. I think they drug him or something like that. Throughout the movie, he starts succumbing to their demands, and he's pulling away from his friends and his girlfriend, Tony, who's trying to reach him throughout. And boy, is she forgiving. Like, there's one scene where she walks in, Danny just killed himself a deer, and the deer blood like spews all over him. And so Sally, of course, swoops right in there. She's pretty much face to face, Danny's shirt's off, and Tony comes in and she's like, what are you doing? And then they have sex. And I guess that's a good segue into really what this movie is. And I just have questions, you know, going behind the scenes. Look, I love 70s and 80s horror movies, okay? And I think the reason being is because they're kind of exploitative. And there was like a debate going on in Killer Flicks today about how you don't see as much nudity in horror movies these days. That stuff has kind of gone by the wayside. Yeah, you see it from time to time, but not that often. But, you know, back in the 80s, it was par for the course. It was pretty common in most horror movies, especially slashers, to see nudity all throughout. Giallo films too. Like, I think Giallo films had it the most. But my point being that I actually preferred that era of cinema, not really just because of nudity, but exploitation in its nature, you know. Because these movies were, I guess, free-spirited, there was just that surprise element, not only in that, but also in terms of violence and blood. You know, you never knew where the bar was. You never knew what the limit was. Whereas these days, you kind of feel like they'll only go so far. And if they go farther, then you're quite surprised. But back then, you know, all bets were off. Now, in this movie, I would imagine, you know, by the time you're on the 6th movie down the run and we're full on B-movie level territory, this definitely did not have a theatrical release. I don't think any of these movies had a theatrical release after the first, except for the newest one that came out, which, by the way, in my town, the new movie only had one night in a theater. And if I missed it, then, you know, it was gone. It was like in January. So maybe that was the thinkings, like, hey, this is a B movie. How can we get young teenagers to watch this movie? Maybe sprinkling a lot of nudity. And this movie not only has, you know, TNA spaced out every 15 minutes. No, it has full-on sex scenes every 15 minutes. You know, that's a con. And if I was 12 years old, that would be the greatest pro ever. Like, this would probably be my favorite movie if I was 12 years old. I like a story, and the story is constantly interrupted by a sex scene throughout this movie. And the story's not that good anyway. Most people are gonna remember this movie because it's the softcore porn movie of the franchise. But back to the story, since I'm staying on the pros, I do like the second half of this movie. The first half is really painful to get through, and we'll get to the cons, but the second half, I think it just really ramps up, and I think it kind of starts with, you guessed it, a sex scene. There's this room in the hotel, and I guess back in the olden days, they would have spectators, you know, in this round, and they would be watching a couple doing it right there in the middle. So this young couple, of course, they go there and they get frisky and they want to try it. And so here comes the inbreds. They come in there and they kill them violently, very violently. You know, they're ripping limbs off and everything. The girl is killed. The guy gets pulled into this other room. He's got a freaking hole in his head. And then here comes Sally, horny as ever, tries to mount him right there. You could literally have a violent kill scene going on, and at the end of the kill scene, they still try to find a way to put a sex scene in there. The best part of the movie to me is the final act And I'm gonna give you a little bit of a spoiler here concerning one of the characters. So if you don't want to know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But anyway, there's this big showdown. Danny has completely lost it at this point. He is full on team inbred. There's a big fight between Tony and Sally, and Tony gets the upper hand and she scalds Sally's face Halloween 2 style in the water. But to my surprise, I'm really Team Tony here. I really like this character. Great final girl. She gets killed, which is a nice surprise actually, because usually you expect the final girl to make it, but no, not this time. And then later in the movie, you got Danny. This is the aftermath of it all, and back in that room that I was talking about with the spectators and all that, Danny and Sally get it on, and she's missing a limb. It's great. Now, I've already talked a little bit about the cons. The production value in this movie looks really, really cheap. The acting is really, really bad. Aquila Zoll, who played Tony, is pretty decent, actually. I liked her intensity in the final act. And Sally is the big standout, even though she goes a little bit overboard. And what I mean by that is you're kind of giggling at her performance just because she goes so out there. But I've said this in the past, I'd rather you really go for it than play it safe and hold back, because she definitely doesn't hold back. So big kudos to Sadie Katz for pulling out a damn good performance and pretty much saves the movie. I haven't talked too much about the killers in this movie, the Mountain Men, who the Wrong Turn franchise is pretty much known for. To me, they kind of take a back seat in this movie. They look like they got their costumes, their masks on November 1st. You know how like the day after Halloween, there's like everything's 50% off and you just get the leave-ins? And maybe that's what was left, because their masks, their costumes just look ridiculous. And it just takes you out of the scene. Also, the scene is just lit way too bright most of the time. There's a way you gotta light these scenes for like horror movies, menacing. You want it to be like menacing. I will say, I forgot to mention this scene, and I have to mention it. There is one scene where they get on this guy with glasses and they get the water hose and they shove it in his mouth, but they also shove it in another area, and there's an explosion, and I literally gut laughed myself off of the couch. So if anything, guys, this movie was entertaining. It's bad, and you're laughing at it along the way, but you're never bored. So I'll definitely give it a humdrum. And I didn't expect that at all. Some of you are gonna be mad at me, but I've seen worse, If anything, it was just zany, and I like movies that are so crazy and out there, and they're always just trying to throw something at you to keep your attention. And this movie definitely does that. And when in doubt, throw a sex scene at the audience. That's what it does. So anyway, Wrong Turn 6. We will be covering the rest of the franchise backwards eventually. Let me know what you guys think of Wrong Turn 6. Looking forward to reading your comments, because I'm sure they're going to be pretty wild. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. We do Free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and Drumdum out.